Joe Clark, and this is the third of our series Cruising in the 20th Century. Part 1 dealt with the 30s, 40s and the 50s, and Part 2 showed footage of cruises in the 1960s, and I promise more. So this film, which we call The Mediterranean Odyssey, is made up of film taken on cine cameras around the Mediterranean in the 60s. For the purpose of the film, I've called it Iberia 1965, but in truth it's made up of several ships, but particularly Iberia. You'll understand too that the quality of the film, taken nearly 40 years ago, varies. But nevertheless, I'm sure you'll enjoy watching it as we pass other ships on our route around the Mediterranean and go sightseeing. So let's sit down and watch. Iberia is leaving Southampton. During the course of the film, we'll see scenes around the ship, passing vessels, and visit 8 different ports. The first port we visit will be Gibraltar, and then Ajaccio in Corsica. From Corsica we sail to Naples, and whilst there we'll see plenty of shipping in the harbour, have a chance to have a walk around the town, and while there there'll be time for 4 different excursions. A day at sea and we arrive in Rhodes with its Greek and Roman ruins. The theme continues as we visit Piraeus. We'll see the Acropolis and the magnificent Parthenon standing right at the top. Venice is the next port of call, where we take a boat up the Grand Canal, visit St. Mark's Square, and finally travel across the lagoon to the Lido and Casino. Cannes and Monte Carlo follow, and from there we travel to Lisbon. In Lisbon there's plenty of time for more excursions before we finally return to Southampton and home. At the start of our voyage around the Mediterranean, Iberia is preparing to sail. She moves down Southampton water and out into the open sea. It's very rough in the Bay of Biscay. But soon she's in quieter waters and sailing serenely towards Gibraltar. We pass what was then a very modern tanker. Soon Gibraltar is in sight, and the passengers gather on deck to watch our entrance. see the town as the pilot boards. The ship anchors outside the harbour, and it's time to go ashore, which we do by tender. We don't have long ashore, so we'll take a taxi trip around the rock. We can see the ship lying at anchor. The famous Barbary apes. They say when these die out, Gibraltar will be ceded back to the Spanish. At Gibraltar Gharry, one method of transport favoured by tourists. There's time to look around the town before we make our way back to the wharf. We board the tender which will take us back to Iberia. We pass the runway of the airport. This has been considerably extended since the 1960s. We have a day at sea in reasonable weather before arriving at our next port, Ajaccio in Corsica. Nowadays, ships can tie up on a wharf, but then in the 60s we had to go ashore by ships' launches, as Iberia anchored outside the harbour. We have a tour of the town. But before returning to the ship, we're serenaded by a local band. It's sometimes amazing how quickly sailing time comes around. A day later, the sun rises as we enter the Bay of Naples. pilot boards. Tugs come alongside to pull us in towards the wharf. There's plenty of shipping to watch as we enter the harbour. The Italian liner Leonardo da Vinci leaves port. She's 33,300 tons and sailed on her first voyage in 1960. As we come alongside, we see the Cristoforo Colombo, a sister to the ill-fated Andrea Doria. She started life in 1954. She was 29,000 tons. Amongst other ships in port, we see the Conte Biancamano tied up at the stern. Another Italian ship, Vulcania, is already tied up ahead of us. We're going to stay 3 days in Naples, and there'll be time for excursions. But just for now, we'll have a look around the town. We find a restaurant overlooking the Bay of Naples. Young boys dive for coins. The south of Italy was still a very poor area in the 1960s. And of course we have to sample the spaghetti bolognese. We travel by car to Vesuvius. A chairlift takes us to the top. A strong smell of sulphur pervades the air. as we reach the top and the crater. As we come down, we visit Herculaneum. And then Pompeii, which was destroyed in AD 79. The ruins give us a fascinating insight into Roman life at that time. Our next excursion is by boat to the island of Capri. From the boat we can see some very expensive villas, one of which was owned by Gracie Fields. But before we go ashore, we're going to visit the Blue Grotto. We have to transfer to small boats, and remember to duck our heads as we reach the entrance. We reach the harbour, and once tied up, we'll take the funicular railway to the top. It's a mighty hot day, but there's lots to see up here. And then we return to the shore by funicular railway. Here we find a lovely hotel with a pool and a restaurant, where we can relax before heading back to our boat to take us back to Naples. Down by the harbour there are various methods of transport. But we're now headed back towards Naples and our ship, and a night's rest before we visit Rome in the morning. We take a train to Rome. Here we see the Piazza Repubblica. and then we visit the Colosseum. The Trevi Fountains. The Swiss Guard at the Vatican. Tourists entering the Sistine Chapel. And lastly, St. Peter's Square. Our time in Naples is nearly over, and we have to return to the ship. A Russian liner. The Giulio Cesare of 27,000 tons is now in port. We sail through the Straits of Messina, the sea Stromboli, smoking as usual. Would you buy a house on the slopes? Passengers enjoy a game of quoit tennis as we have a pleasant day at sea. Rhodes. We watch as a super yacht sails through the entrance to the harbour. Ashore, we see many ancient ruins, Greek, Roman, Byzantine, and also from the time of the Knights of the Crusaders. Down by the harbour again, we have a chance to stroll around the town. And for those of us who like a little bit of shopping, there are plenty of souvenirs to purchase. We leave Rhodes and head towards Piraeus. Just look at those dolphins playing around the bow. The harbour is full of shipping once again. 10,000-ton Mount Olympus. Coaches wait to take us on our excursion to the Parthenon. We reach the Acropolis and walk up to the Parthenon. We're going to spend quite a bit of time exploring this ancient building. It's remarkable that these pillars, carved in the shape of figures, have survived so long. A wonderful view from lower down. Here, soldiers dressed in traditional clothes guard the palace. The Olympic Stadium. And now it's back to the ship. We pass the Royal Mail steamer Orontes on her homeward voyage. She's a regular caller to Piraeus. The sun goes down on another remarkable day. We can relax now as we have another day at sea before our next port. Crew impromptu skiffle band practice on the well deck. Back at sea, passengers are relaxing around the pool, and we're going to have the aquatic sports today. The greasy pole is always one of the favourite sports. Try and knock your opponent off the pole and into the pool. And then the pyjama race. Believe me when I tell you it's very difficult to get in and out of wet pyjamas. The Venice pilot approaches. We're pulled towards our berth by tugs. Numerous barges and ferries pass us. We shouldn't forget it's a working canal as well as a tourist attraction. You can see quite clearly St. Mark's Basilica. Our first excursion is a boat trip up the Grand Canal. As we pass by the Doge's Palace, we see the gondoliers plying their trade. We pass the church of Santa Maria della Salute. As well as gondoliers, there's plenty of commercial traffic. We pass under the famous Rialto Bridge. And then approach the bridge near the station, where we'll turn around and go back towards the ship. A lovely picture of a gondolier with his passengers passing down one of the side canals. We leave our boat and take a walking tour. There's always plenty of activity and tourists to be seen in St. Mark's Square. There's also any number of pigeons. well worth a look overhead. There are, of course, other beautiful squares, but no other could rival San Marco for size and splendour. As we walk along, we can take a closer view of the Rialto Bridge. A gondolier passes close by. Traffic on the canals is almost as bad as Piccadilly Circus in the rush hour. A close-up view of the Bridge of Sighs leading from the Palace of Justice to the prison. Now take a trip further up the canal. Venetian glass is famous throughout the world. Our excursion takes in this glassmaker at work. We come out into the sunlight. And now we speed across the lagoon to the casino and Lido. Time soon goes and we have to return to the ship. Back at sea, we pass the new P&O liner Canberra. She would have been in her 4th or 5th year at this stage. Emergencies happen all the time at sea, and on this occasion we're asked to take on a sick sailor from one of the BP tankers. Passengers will watch as the boat is lowered, prior to going across to the tanker to collect the seamen. We see the BP tanker hove to about half a mile away. Mission accomplished. The lifeboat returns to our ship. We can now continue our cruise towards Cannes, our next port of call. We have another day at sea to relax. Iberia anchors outside the harbour. This is where the well-to-do park their yachts. But we're going to have some time on the beach to top up our suntan. And then we travel by car to Monte Carlo. Prince Rainier's palace. A stroll around the town before returning to the ship. The sun sets as we head off towards Lisbon. Some shots taken of the upper decks from the bridge. Crew practice lifeboat and emergency drill at least once a week. Crew members gather on the well deck to watch the passing of Oriana. She's still in her Orient Line livery. We have reached the river Tagus as we approach Lisbon. One of the two forts guarding the entrance to the harbour. A monument erected to the memory of Henry the Navigator. What was then called the Salazar Bridge, a new bridge across the Tagus. Independence of the American export lines is 23,700 tons. Santa Maria of Sea Colonial Lisbon is 20,900 tons. There are many other ships in this very busy harbour. An old Portuguese sailing barge. For those who love ships, there are plenty here, either tied up alongside, anchored in the harbour, and even in dry dock. Another sailing barge. We're off for shore on yet another excursion. Our tour takes us first to the city. There'll be time to stop and see many of the tourist attractions before we motor out towards Estoril. We have a chance to tour the gardens here, which are magnificent. Back in the city, we stop off at the Winter Palace. We're entertained by the changing of the guard. We have a closer look at one of the two forts that guard the harbour. And then it's back to the ship for the last leg of our cruise. On our way back out of the River Tagus, we pass the Angola, Portuguese liner of 13,000 tons. the Australis of Chandra's line, ex-America, and the Queen Anna Maria of 22,000 tons, once the Empress of Britain. We are now headed out into the Bay of Biscay on our way home to Southampton. As we move up Southampton water, we pass the lightship Calshot. Deck crew line the decks as we move into our berth. Arcadia has arrived before us and we'll berth behind her. Safely docked, we have a last look at Iberia before leaving the ship after a memorable cruise. We trust you've enjoyed the cruise and we look forward to seeing you again soon.